Sanders, City of St. Petersburg.
Excellent. And do we
Oh,
have?
I think he just came on.
There he
All right.
is.
So we also have David Albritton from Clearwater. There you are.
There he is.
I'd like a motion to allow Commissioner Albritton to participate by Zoom.
So moved.
There's a motion
Second.
and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Welcome, Commissioner Albritton. Can you hear us okay? Okay,
think you're muted.
awesome. So now is the time for public comment. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak? All right, seeing none, we'll move forward to our first action item. Do I have a motion to approve the May 17th meeting minutes?
Move approval. Second.
All right, there is a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. The motion passes. Moving on to 3B, the South St. Pete Mobility Study Consultant Contract. Nicole Dufa, our PSTA Senior Planner, will present the study consultant agreement.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning, Nicole.
Sorry.
Wonderful. Alrighty. Good morning, Mr. Chair. Good morning, board members. Thank you for braving the rain earlier this morning. Like Commissioner Schulman said, my name is Nicole Dufa, and I'm a senior planner here, and I'm the project manager for the South St. Petersburg CRA Mobility Study that we are here today to request your recommendation for approval for a contract with HDR Engineering, Inc. To complete this study. There we go. Here we are. And before I jump into the study details, just a quick reminder of where the study came about. During the Sunrunner Rising TOD study and outreach, we analyzed the economic impact of the Sunrunner and the potential for new development around the station areas. And we also looked at how people will be getting to the Sunrunner from the communities around the station areas themselves. And so it was in the conversations that we were having with our stakeholders, particularly community leaders in the South St. Petersburg area, where we really saw the need for a further analysis on transportation equity in the areas around the 32nd Street stations as well as the 22nd Street stations. And so this study is funded by the Federal Transit Administration under the Areas of Persistent Poverty program. The program itself supports projects that address transportation challenges faced by areas of persistent poverty. And so the map here is of the entire South St. Pete CRA itself. It is the largest and most dense environmental justice area in Pinellas County, and it's also one of the largest CRAs in the state. You can see the shading here, the areas of highest equity concern with the lowest incomes and the highest communities of color represented in the dark blue. You can also see that the Sunrunner route itself in the yellow-orange goes directly through the CRA, and 4 different station pairs actually serve the CRA itself. And so with the Sunrunner on board and the issues facing the South St. Pete CRA, we know that connecting to premium transit services like the Sunrunner is critical for supporting people getting better jobs with higher wages. And so for the study itself, the project outcomes are really looking at a vision and implementation plan that have a recommendations of transportation improvements that prioritize different improvements by mode. We'll be looking at different multimodal and different transportation service options, not just the PSTA bus service itself. We'll really be looking at how to enhance the full multimodal system in the area. There's lots of different work that has already been done, studies that have already been done in the CRA and then within St. Petersburg. And so looking at the plans that already exist, like the Complete Streets Implementation Plan, neighborhood plans, the joint Deuces Live and Warehouse Arts District plan, and looking at what recommendations have come out of those already in order to make sure that we are prioritizing projects in the right way that the community has already said that they would like to see. The study will also include robust community outreach. It'll be really important that the projects that come out of this study are supported by the community and needed by the community. And so we will have a strong emphasis on that throughout the project. But one of the parts of the project that the city itself was really excited to see was some initial design and engineering work included with this study because one of the barriers to planning studies is that it can take a while to actually implement them due to funding constraints and that sort of thing. So this study should include some initial design and engineering work for the top prioritized projects. For a study timeline, it should take approximately 18 months to complete. And once the contract is approved, we'll be looking at starting up the project team, going into some discovery, what exists out there today, really starting with our outreach, how are our folks getting around today, going into a vision plan where we'll be looking at what does the community want to see, as well as then a final mobility plan, what are the strategies and tactics that we want to use to get there, and then how will we implement that with a final action strategy. In the public engagement and community outreach throughout, we want to make sure that folks know that we are listening, and then when we come back, we say, here's what we heard, and here's how we can strategize a way to get there. And the study, yes, the action strategy will be the final with the list of different transportation projects as well as the possible funding sources that might be available to them out there as well. For our project partners and funding, we couldn't do this without our partners. Obviously, the Federal Transit Administration provided us the $360,000 in federal funding. We matched it with $40,000 of our local funding here, 10% or $10,000 coming from PSTA, $10,000 coming from the City of St. Pete, as well as $20,000 coming from FDOT. And then the final partner that we are bringing onto this team is our project consultant, and the reason for the action item that we have before you today. And so I will go ahead and let our highly motivated procurement director tell you more about the competitive procurement process we just completed.
Good morning, Mr. Chair.
Morning.
Nice to see you again, sir. In mid-April, we released a request for qualifications. It's a different procurement. It's a different solicitation method, and in the state of Florida is known as CCNA, and on the FTA, they would call it a Brooks method type of procurement. We posted the solicitation on PSTA's website and on DemandStar in accordance with the Florida Statute 287.055, and as I said, CCNA, or Consultants Competitive Negotiation Act. In mid-May, May 16th, we received 6 proposals. One from Alfred Benish and Company, ESRP Corporation, EXP US Services, HDR Engineering, Inclusivity, and Madrid CPWG. We had a tremendous amount of competition on this. In your packet is the evaluation criteria that was used that we used to evaluate the proposals. On May 31st, the evaluation committee held their initial evaluation committee meeting, and in your packets, you see the matrix on where everyone scored. The highest 2 ranked proposals, HDR and Inclusivity, were invited to give presentations on their proposals in specific areas that the evaluation committee members wanted them to expand on. Nicole mentioned partners, and I would tell you the City of St. Petersburg were not only partners from the funding perspective, but also from the evaluation committee aspect. Ms. Cheryl Stacks, I think the transportation manager for the City of St. Pete, and then we have Cassidy, and I'm not going to pronounce your name because I'll butcher it, Cassidy, from the City of St. Pete that's here with us now, along with PSTA staff, we're on the evaluation committee. From the evaluation committee, as Ms. Cheryl Stacks. That's kind of weird hearing myself twice, right? But as I said, the top 2 firms came in and they did presentations. And in your package, you'll see that it was very close. Both of them gave great presentations. However, there's a winner, and that's HDR and the evaluation committee members. They scored 94. Inclusivity scored 92. The solicitate from a DEI, and I also serve as the Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Liaison Officer, or the DB officer for the agency, and we put a pretty hefty goal on it of 24%, and I'm glad to see that HDR met that goal. There's more. One of their main subcontractors is in the process now, and I'm looking over at him right now, is in the process now of getting DBE certified. If he is able to get DBE certified between now and next week, that will increase their percentage up to, at minimum, 38 to 40% DBE participation, which is a tremendous amount on a up to $400,000 contract. We've done work with HDR in the past. However, we did do a responsibility and responsiveness check. HDR is a top-notch engineer A&E firm, and everything came back as expected. Nicole spoke on the fiscal impact, so it's in your packet exactly where all the funding comes from again. And once again, the recommendation that we bring before you this morning is contingent upon successful negotiations. Recommend approval of a 2-year contract for the South St. Petersburg CRA mobility study with HDR Engineering Incorporated for a total contract amount not to exceed $400,000. If there's any questions, Nicole and I would be more than happy to answer them. And then we also have HDR in the audience as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Al.
Commissioner Oliver?
Yes, when you went out for the initial request for qualifications, there was no, it's qualifications, not price, there was no dollars at that point, is that correct?
That is correct. That, if we did, that would be in violation of the CCNA.
Okay, so then you interviewed the two firms, HDR and Inclusivity.
Yes, sir.
And was there any dollar amounts at that point discussed?
No,
Or
sir.
You just made the determination based on,
Technical.
okay. And so what, this was close, and you've done a good job of this, but where did the $400,000 figure come from, and how do we know that Inclusivity wouldn't have done it for $200,000?
Very good question. Very good question. The dollar amount that we put on, and correct me if I'm wrong, Nicole, the dollar amount that we have on the action item is the available funding.
Okay.
Right now, I'm in the process, and I just spoke to HDR, we're in the process of getting their financials, their payrolls, and all those things that are required during the CCNA procurement, and then we will negotiate the final dollar amount.
And on what basis is $400,000 the budget? Similar studies, what prompted you to plug that number in as opposed to $200,000? Seems like a lot of money.
Yes, so, and I know Heather can speak to the grant itself, but when we applied for the grant, we wanted to study larger than the study area. And so it would have included a lot more potential outreach, a lot more potential study work. However, the FTA kind of narrowed down the scope to the CRA itself and really focusing on some of the, we will probably focus on the major corridors. Specifically in the CRA, and so the dollar amount came from comparable studies, other plans, and then I'm pretty sure that's the majority of where we came up with the funding amount is based on what we thought was needed through other previous experiences and plans that exist.
Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Fix-Sanders.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the presentation. And a couple of questions I had. Number one, I thought the 400,000 was a bit high. And the first thing came to my mind was because of the collaboration and so many studies that have already been done, especially when you say the St. Petersburg Southside CRA.
Yeah.
We've had so many studies done, a lot of consultants already on the job. So I'm just trying to see comparably what the difference would have been in the RFQ. Then also, when I looked at, and I just heard the presentation, when it said will be or may be DBE certified, did Inclusivity or any of the other ones already have someone that was DBE certified? And then another question, I'm going to throw them all at you at one time. Maybe you'll be able to answer one time certified. Then when you look at the criteria, and it says relevant experience, which gives them the highest weight, is it the experience of the, I want to say the major bidder? Because I'm hoping one of the things that we're looking for is trying to be able to bring newer businesses and subcontractors into the fold. So when you looked and gave it that dollar amount, that criteria amount of 300, did you look at the team collectively? And if so, hopefully in that collective assessment of whether or not they're eligible, that you also gave some additional considerations to those organizations that are kind of mentoring, sub-mentoring, some of the sub-prime contractors, because we don't want to continue to not have doors open.
Right.
And especially when you're talking about the South St. Pete CRA. And I know I've asked a lot, but then when you say South St. Pete CRA, you know my antenna go up when it comes to that. In order for this to be relevant in my eyes, and when we hit and we talk about the South St. Pete CRA, I'm hoping in that experience that we used local.
Yes, ma'am.
We have a
In the
lot of
process.
answers to your questions, I know.
All right.
So I know.
Well, you
do a
take number
whole
one,
lot
I'll
of
take
them
two.
out.
Yeah,
You take
yeah,
one, you take
yeah.
two, you take four. Okay.
So I can speak to your initial question. How will this plan work with the other plans? How do we come up with that $400,000 amount being a little high? So one of the pieces that I spoke to that will be included in this process is also the initial design and engineering work for at least one or two of the top priority projects. And so because of that design and engineering work, which costs significantly more to include that into a planning study, I think that dollar amount is reasonable in the eyes of PSTA as far as what we'll be able to do with that dollar amount. Because, as you were saying, there's lots of other plans and studies that have been done, but what's being done with the recommendations out of them? It oftentimes needs more funding, right? The plan is one step of the process. The plan will have, here's what we should do, and then it'll take more money to then say, okay, here's what we can then fund out of that pot. And so we're hoping that the $400,000 really is able to help kind of expedite that process in getting some of the projects completed.
And we'll get a breakdown of that?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, absolutely. And so that's speaking to the first question, and as a part of this consultant team, they have actually done projects in the CRA already. They did the 18th Avenue Complete Streets plan. They've worked on the downtown St. Pete mobility study, so they're really familiar with with the area itself, with St. Petersburg. And we do have a very local team, and I'll elaborate a lot more on the DBEs and the procurement process and the selection. So their relevant experience was really key to their proposal, focusing on the work that they already know about St. Pete, the work that has been done, and they brought some really great sub-consultants to the table, and I know Al will elaborate on that, but that was one of the reasons why HDR really stood out, is that their subs are very local from St. Pete and are very familiar with the community there. So I'll go ahead and pass it over to Al to
Real
speak to the
quick,
rest.
before you,
Yep.
with the sub-consultants and going through the DBE process, we won't have any kickback from any other proposals saying, well, we didn't have DBE, but we would have gone out and started the process had we had the opportunity as well.
Yep.
That would be you?
Yeah,
Okay.
yes, ma'am. And I just don't want to misspeak on the subject because it's a sensitive one. Competition is, that's what we try, if in the procurement office, we try to make sure that we get competition. We want to make sure that we have good partners that we're doing business with. The firm that ranked number 2, Inclusivity, outstanding firm, and I met with them prior to the solicitation going out. And I suggested to them that, hey, instead of you taking a back seat, you know this area, why don't you try to be a prime on it? And the principal of the company looked at me like, hey, I never thought about that. And that was something that resounded. I think Cassidy would agree, and Nicole would agree. That was something that stood out in their proposal. Inclusivity is a certified DBE. They are a certified DBE. And they did an outstanding job, and they came in, as you could tell, with 92 versus 94 points overall. They're connected in the community, and if things aren't in the CCNA process, if negotiations don't work out with HDR, and I'm very optimistic that they will, and I'm getting affirmative nod of the head, but if they're not, then we automatically, by default, move to number 2. In regard to HDR, HDR has a robust DBE team that they have assembled, and to piggyback off what Nicole said, they have local presence, and I would ask you to, and I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank right
Shanti.
now, but can you stand up and introduce yourself and what your firm is and where you're located at?
Oh, LaShante Keys, Keys Construction Firm, located in St. Petersburg, Florida.
And how long have you been in St. Petersburg, and what are some of the
All my life.
projects?
All my life, so I've been in St. Pete all my life. And then just to add something else to it, technically through my firm, I was recruited by 3 companies that were bidding for the same project. I chose HDR because of what they brought to the table. And so again, even with what's being said at the table right now, and I could have been in the top 2 because I was also recruited by Inclusivity to be on their team, along with Kimberly Horn on that team as well. So the community engagement process that I bring to the table and the community outreach that I bring to the table is really, really great. Currently working on the Tropicana Field, not Tropicana Field, excuse me, the gas plant district redevelopment, where I'm on the Heinz Rays team with that one as well, and also doing some other projects as well. And I was on another team when it was called the Tropicana with Unicorp that made the top 4 as well. So in regards to that, again, locally raised, born and raised, been in St. Pete all my life, invested in St. Pete in some of the district as well. And as a matter of fact, was also one of the former, before Beatrice Farrell, who was on the Deuces as a corridor, I also had that job before her in the CRA district as well.
So one additional question to you, sir. Where are you at in the certification process?
We're almost there. Yep. So everything is moving along nicely.
Okay. So Commissioner Sanders, we did, and it was a concerted effort by HDR, and they made sure that they put together a strong subcontracting team that represents the area that is going to be studied. In regard to the evaluation criteria, Board Chair, you've hammered it home with me to make sure that we put the evaluation at a high level, the evaluation criteria. And yes, the qualifications, and one of the things that we did unique to this solicitation, and it can only be done in this solicitation process, the CCNA process, is we put geographic preference in it. We wanted to make sure that we allocated points specific to make sure that a firm had a presence within the radius of where the study was going to be performed, and along with the experience and all of those things. So I would tell you, hats off to Nicole and her development of the scope of work, and the procurement staff that worked on this project. I said I kind of sit back and I kind of coach a little bit, but I think we did a pretty good job in trying to be as comprehensive of making sure that we bring the right firm to you, Mr. Chair, and the planning committee for recommendation.
Okay, and thank you for that. And for full disclosure, I know Mr. Keys quite well, as well as I know the principle of inclusivity. I would have preferred having copies. I guess being on council, we get 800 sheets of paper every week to read and to review, and we didn't get any of that information as to how they were ranked, what the evaluation, how it went, what we're asking for final say. So my council I would have liked to have seen that back up to moving forward, but this is just a request to move forward to full commission, correct?
To full board, yes, ma'am.
Okay, will we be able to get that information prior to?
If that's the will of the board, yes, ma'am.
In addition to the scoring, you would like that copy of the
Because I
proposal?
want to know what was scored, yeah.
Okay, yeah. I'll get
Okay.
that.
Right.
So, I would always say yes, but since we're still in kind of the procurement process and it's
Well, I'll
not,
meet with you one-on-one, is that all right?
say again?
I can meet with you one-on-one?
Yeah.
Okay.
do that one.
Yes, ma'am.
And if you'd like me to be a part of that meeting, I'm happy
Yeah.
to.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Any additional questions?
I'm done, thank
Okay.
you.
All right, thank you. I have a couple questions. So you talked about how the dollar amount is $400,000. It's bigger than we would expect because of some initial design and engineering. Can you give a breakdown as far as what you expect the phase of the project to be as far as the percentage of the total budget?
Yes, absolutely. About a quarter of the budget will go to, the largest percentage of the budget is the design and engineering portion, about just over 30% of the budget. And I can provide that. That was in my slides, and I think I took out the pie chart that took out the percentage allocation. About 20% each, the outreach component, and about 20% as well as for the vision planning. And then, let me think about making sure that my pies are correct. And then the smaller portion is the implementation plan with the majority of the largest piece of the pie is the design and engineering.
Okay.
And so I can provide that, I can include that in the slides for the board meeting.
All right, I appreciate that. And this is a contract where things are going to be billed as work is done.
Correct.
Good, okay. Jeff, something with that?
Yes, ma'am. I mean, yes, sir. Still a little rattled from all the questions from Commissioner
Stop
Sexton.
it.
Don't show weakness, don't show weakness.
And I don't get to present in front of the planning committee that often. But that's one of the things, and I see HDR, we're still in negotiations on that. So I don't want to overpromise, but I see HDR is over there taking diligent notes. And what I would like to propose is that we meet with them to make sure that your pie chart aligns with what they submit us from a pricing perspective.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely, because that'll be contingent upon the pricing as well.
Right, and I also understand it also be contingent on what comes out of the whole process, right? And how
Yes.
long certain phases take. So it's just a kind of an indication of where we're thinking that money's going to go as opposed to a hard
Right,
and fast
absolutely. Yes.
budget.
That's what we imagine. Yeah.
Can you, and I like the initial design and engineering piece, but can you give, and you keep saying some top projects that may come out of this. Can you give an idea of what some of those top projects, I realize part of it's going to be discovering what those
Yeah,
should be,
yeah,
but what are we looking at as far as those types of projects?
It could include anything from improving crosswalks and sidewalk intersections, that sort of thing, like improving access and improving mobility around the different neighborhoods, corridors. So it could look at the physical infrastructure and improving physical infrastructure, whether that's maybe better bus stops, maybe improving an area around a PSTA bus stop. That could look like exploring microtransit service, exploring, we had a project with the city where we went in for grant funding to expand AVA, an autonomous vehicle pilot. Would it be valuable along 22nd Street? Could we then take people along 22nd Street to the Sunrunner station using a microtransit option? So it could explore the feasibility of a project like that. It could look at, so this wouldn't be design and engineering, but other projects could be improving PSTA bus service in the area, looking at PSTA bus routes. Other design and engineering work might include, I think generally, I feel like physical infrastructure around how we get around. So it will be all mobility related, related to how we get to bus service, how we get to our jobs, commercial businesses, and that sort of thing. So that would be the best general ballpark that I want to give you right now,
Okay.
without knowing what other priorities are coming out of the community.
Right, and I realize the whole part of this process is to uncover some of
Yes,
those. So
yes.
we're not going in with
Yes.
here's what we want to do, we're just going to
Yeah.
just say we're doing all this
Yeah.
other stuff till we get to the end we want.
It could further the Complete Streets implementation plan. I know that they did 18th Avenue South, but there are other corridors that have been identified for adding bike lanes, maybe protected bike lanes, that sort of thing. And so I think it could have anything to do with walking, biking, busing, maybe driving. We'll see about that. That's not, but it is improving how we get around in the CRA.
Right.
Mr. Chair, maybe just so I can make sure I understand. So what you're going to negotiate over the next week with HDR is on a contract. Really, you're going to negotiate the hours that they're going to do for the design, for the visioning and the planning effort at the beginning, and it's going to be far less than a $400,000. It's going to be like one of the small percentages you listed, right? And then there's going to be the remainder of the $400,000 left at the end, and then there's gonna be projects identified that you just kind of outline samples of, that then we'll just see what engineering and design can be done then? Is that how it's gonna sort of work?
So Brad, you hit the nail on the head, and I think Commissioner Shulman, you were, and maybe just from experience working with you, this will be a task order-based contract. So the initial task, it will go out and task in different phases. And the first one, just wild shot, the first task order will be for the visioning and the planning. And then for any other subsequent projects that come out, like Brad spoke about, there'll be an individual task order issued for each one of those separate tasks.
Thank you. I did have a kind of, I'll turn it to your neck of the woods. In looking at the results from the interviews, or the one-on-one presentations, it seems a little, I don't understand A2, the understanding / approach to the scope of work. The score between the two companies is significantly different, but, I see that the team there are equal, the relevant experience is relatively equal. So I'm not sure, what was Inclusivity not doing, or what was HDR doing even better than their competitor to warrant the difference in score there?
Okay,
But-
just, go ahead.
That'll probably be me.
Okay.
So as a part of, because I was on the
I just like to
evaluation
throw Alan
committee.
under the bus whenever I can.
So the understanding and approach to scope of work really talked about how they might set up a study. What their what information that they already know. Here's what we're thinking. Here's how we would prioritize going out into the community. Here are the contacts that we would go to. Here's the stakeholder groups that we are familiar with. Here's the data that we already have available and what we plan to do with that data. So they really, as far as the difference in what Inclusivity brought to the table versus HDR, for example, HDR has been doing projects in the CRA in St. Petersburg, and they really have a comprehensive understanding of different data statistics, whether it be transportation safety data related to crashes and pedestrian, bicycle mobility with the Complete Streets implementation work that they've done. So in their approach to the scope of work, they really outlined how they would do this study, and it gave the evaluation committee a lot of confidence in their ability to complete it. The other members of the evaluation committee were 2 members from the city, one working with the transportation department as well as one working with the economic development, so working directly with the CRA. And for all of us, I'll share that Inclusivity was a really strong competitor, and they really came to the table. But the technical side of the approach, the scope of work, was just a little bit lacking compared to what HDR was able to demonstrate to us and show us in their proposal. And so I know that we can talk a little bit about what was in their proposals. They're both qualified firms, they both have members of their teams that were from the city of St. Pete and familiar with the city of St. Pete. So for the evaluation committee, it really, the technical skills that HDR was able to demonstrate to us really stood out in that way, while the rest of their relevant experience and the rest of their other categories were very close.
I'd just like to make a brief comment after Nicole. One of the things I think that the city of St. Petersburg realized is that we use a scoring system or a portal called Bonfire. And what we could do after this process is there's staff actually had to write detailed comments on how they scored and why they scored a certain way. So that's something that's unique that a lot of agencies don't have through their solicitation process, that we're very fortunate that we have. So we have all those comments that Nicole spoke about. We have those memorialized for the reason of there's 3 firms already that have requested debriefings. And they're asking the similar questions like you are. Hey, where did we come up short? And we use those comments from the evaluation committee to talk to inclusivity, because they want to debrief as one, to say, hey, this is where you fell short. And it helps them in the future, Commissioner Fix-Anders, for when they go out and they approach different projects in the future. It helps them from a mentoring and a coaching perspective. And also Maggie Soto and myself, we work with those small businesses to help prepare them for when they get these big contracts in front of them on how to prepare and submit.
Al, thank you for adding that clarification. I think that's an important piece. Because I know if I was putting in the time to do.
Costs a lot of money.
Then you know, that there's something coming back in the way of mentoring, coaching, and explanation, I think is very helpful. Are there other questions or comments? All right, seeing none, I'll entertain a motion, if there is one.
Clarify the motion again.
To recommend
The
approval.
recommendation is contingent.
I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah.
The recommendation is contingent upon successful negotiations. Recommend approval of a 2-year contract for the South St. Petersburg CRA Mobility Study with HDR Engineering Incorporated for a total contract amount not to exceed $400,000.
I'll go ahead and move approval pending what I need to, because I can always vote during full commission. No,
Thank
if
you.
I don't approve of it.
Second.
All right, we have a reluctant motion and a tepid second. All in favor?
Yes.
Yes, there we go. Commissioner Oliver.
Trying to change the mood.
Darn
Trying
too.
to change
Is
the
what
mood.
he just said. All right, that passed unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Nicole. Thank you, Al.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
All right, it's 3C, the City of Clearwater Land Source. And by the way, Commissioner Albritton, I apologize. I meant to look, and Nicole just left. I hope you didn't have any additional comments that I missed, or are you frozen?
No.
Okay,
Good conversation now.
okay. I'll try to do better to look up and see if you're trying to get our attention. Mentioning the City of Clearwater reminded me that you're here. Land swap agreement, Abhishek Dayal, the Director of Project Management, will talk about an extension to the Clearwater land swap agreement.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Chair, Planning Committee members, and Commissioner Albritton, good morning. I'm Abhishek Dayal, I'm the Director of Project Management, and this item is for action. The recommendation is to approve an amendment to the land swap agreement between the City of Clearwater and PSTA to extend the due diligence period to October 31st for completing some additional environmental assessment work. So just to refresh everyone's memory, if you recall, PSTA operates bus service in Clearwater, downtown Clearwater, at the Park Street Terminal, which is shown here in blue. And in conversations with the City of Clearwater, we are looking to build a multimodal facility at Court and Myrtle site, that's shown here in the green dot. And this facility is going to be a multimodal facility. It's going to be larger, much larger than the Park Street Terminal, twice the size in terms of number of bus bays. Certainly will come with technology upgrades with passenger information systems, improved and safer pedestrian access to and from the facility, including multimodal connections. And I do want to emphasize multimodal connections, including ride-hailing, paratransit service, as well as connections to our bike access as well as accommodating our growing electric fleet footprint here at this facility. And we are looking to have this a LEED certified facility. We are in design right now. As part of our due diligence, when we signed the agreement with the City of Clearwater, we completed a phase 2 environmental site assessment. And what that entails is our contractor did some soil borings around the site to see if there was any evidence of contamination. As many of you or some of you might know, this facility had lots of uses in the past 50, 60 years. The St. Pete Times building used to be on this site. In fact, you can see the warehouse building onto the left. So there have been a lot of uses in the past. There was a CSX spur that actually ran right down the middle of the property. So our contractor, our consultant did do some soil borings, and they did find some traces of contamination, some hydrocarbons and petroleum products, which thankfully is actually less than the requirement for an industrial or commercial use, which is what we're contemplating here. Now, similarly, the city of Clearwater also performed a similar assessment on the PSTA site. And they also found some traces of contamination on the property. So both parties agreed that we do have to do some additional assessment to understand the level of contamination. Just to kind of recall some of the steps that we all followed, City of Clearwater and PSTA, we both agreed to exchange the properties back in October of last year, which came to this committee as well. We both completed the phase 2 assessment, which I just showed the results from. And so we all agreed that we do have to do some more due diligence, sharpening our pencils a little bit more to understand the level of contamination, and work with the Florida Department of Environmental Protection to understand what type of remediation we need to do for the uses that we're contemplating. So the good news is that the design process continues. That does not affect or cause any delays to the project overall. We're still in design, and we're working on a 30% design right now. So this continues in parallel to the design process. So the City of Clearwater did take action in June. There was unanimous approval to extend the land swap agreement until that assessment is completed. PSTA board will be taking action pending the action by this committee. And then we do anticipate additional assessment to be completed around August-September timeframe with our contractor. And then following that, if everything, all parties agree on a remediation plan, we do anticipate closing on the property by October 31st. So with that, the recommendation is to extend the due diligence period or extend the land swap agreement for the due diligence period to October 31st so we can complete those environmental assessments. With that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions? There's a motion.
Second.
And second, Commissioner Albritton, do you have anything to add before we vote?
No, looking for a hopefully unanimous vote on this and move forward to the regular committee, so.
All right, well, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? All right, motion passed unanimously. Thank you, Abhishek.
Thank you.
Moving on to item 3D, the general services contract. Jacob Labutka is PSTA's planning manager, and David Hensler, PSTA's contract specialist, will present the recommended general services contract.
All right, thank you, Chair, and good morning, everybody. So my name is Jacob Labutka, Planning Manager here at PSTA, and today I am going to be presenting on our general services contracts, which we have just finished the procurement period for, and taking our recommendations for the selected vendors for you today. So our GSCs allow staff here to be able to perform a wide range of one-off planning, architecture, engineering, and other related activities that PSTA neither has the staff capacity or, more importantly, the staff expertise to complete, or at least not fully, so we rely on the expertise of consultants to help fill in any knowledge gaps for one-off type projects. So today, the action item is contingent upon successful negotiations, recommending of approval of a task work order-based contract to 3 firms, AECOM, HNTB, and WSP, for a 3-year contract with 2 one-year options with a not-to-exceed value of $2 million per vendor, and we're authorizing the CEO to exercise the 2 one-year options. So like I just mentioned, so this will be a task work order based contract. So say, I need a one-off planning study done, maybe Abhishek needs design services for a future bus bay, maybe Henry needs something for the maintenance facility. This is a very comprehensive contract that covers a wide range of one-off services that it's important for us to have that consultant expertise to help us complete. So within the RFQ, we put out about 3 buckets, if you will, of work that we are requesting vendors to have knowledge in. First being architectural and engineering. The second related to planning, project development, and environmental compliance. I have a picture of the Sunrunner up here because there were a lot of Sunrunner-related tasks that were performed through the GSC, and operational efficiency and technology assessment and deployment. So this covers a wide range of tasks, and each one of these bullets probably has about 15 to 20 bullets underneath it. So it gives staff a lot of flexibility to be able to perform a lot of different needed tasks. So to give you a few more specific examples of work that has been performed under the GSC, so we've previously pictured here is the design renderings for the Clearwater Beach Transit Center, which is just before the roundabout over on Clearwater Beach. We've also done Sunrunner-related activities through the GSC, including the initial small starts rating several years ago. We've also done bus shelter and ADA landing pad specs, and something that is not in here that Nicole brought to my attention is the agency's Sustainable Strategic Plan was also done through the GSC. So a lot of different projects fall under this umbrella. And so with that, I'm going to pass my invisible football to Al to discuss the procurement part of this process.
Thanks, Jacob. I think Commissioner Fig Sanders or you, Mr. Chair, talked about mentoring and helping small companies. Well, here internally, we mentor and we help grow staff as well, and that's something that our HR Director, Trish, is pretty adamant about. This procurement that we talked about, areas of persistent poverty, and I spoke about CCNA and all those good things, committee members, this falls underneath that same category, but just multiply it by 3. And I have a relatively new member of staff, Mr. David Hensler, that's going to present this to you. But I just wanted you to know that David has undertaken this, and David is like a tremendous asset to the procurement department. I'm looking over at my boss because I know she would agree. And David did this procurement, and yes, I was in the background, but David, I just want to go on record as saying I think you did an outstanding job with this, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Al. Good morning, members of the committee and Chairman. I'm David Hensler, Contract Specialist, and I did want to go over this procurement process with you today for the General Services Consultant contracts. On April 26th, we released our request for qualifications. We posted that solicitation on our website in accordance with our procurement policy and with the Florida Statute 287.055, which is the Consultants Competitive Negotiation Act, CCNA, sometimes called the Brooks Method. We had the solicitation out on the street for just under a month. The day that it closed might be memorable for some of you. It was a board meeting day. We received 5 proposals on May 24th from AECOM Technical Services, CDM Smith, HDR Engineering, HNTB Corporation, and WSP USA. We comprised an evaluation committee consisting of internal staff members here at PSTA. And you'll see in your packet that the evaluation criteria that we used was included. I do apologize, Commissioner, we did not include the proposals or a breakdown of the scoring, so maybe that's something we can talk about. On June 21st, the evaluation committee met to score the proposals, and the scores are also listed in your packet. WSP USA, scored 939.33. AECOM was at 916.67, and HNTB was at 916. The remaining 2 proposals were considered outside of the competitive range, and the top 3 proposals, offerors were invited to negotiate with the authority, which we are currently doing. We did do a responsiveness and a responsibility check on these firms to ensure that they were eligible for an award. These are known entities that we've worked with previously, but on every solicitation, we do a responsiveness and a responsibility check. So the fiscal impact of this is from adopted capital improvement programs and capital grants. And there was a diversity, equity, and inclusion piece that I did also want to go over and highlight. Out of the 3 vendors that we are currently negotiating with, they had a combined 13 certified DBE subcontractors on their subcontractor team. Out of those 13, 11 of them were located here in the state of Florida. Not all necessarily in Pinellas County, but all in the state of Florida. So 11 out of the 13 DBEs are Florida local. So that brings me back to the recommendation Contingent upon successful negotiations, recommend approval of a 3-year contract with 2 one-year options for general services consultant services with AECOM Technical Services, HNTB Corporation, and WSP USA for a total contract amount not to exceed $2 million each, and authorize the CEO to exercise the 2 one-year options. And at this point, if there's any questions, myself, Jacob, Al, and whomever else might be able to answer, can answer any of your questions.
All right, thank you so much. Are there any questions? Commissioner Fix Sanders, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I don't really have any questions, because I think, this piece has been vetted for us enough. And just to respond to the backup material, generally, especially for some things like this, and we do have RFQs, we don't always get every detailed information for everything. We do take some staff recommendations. But I think the difference between this and the previous is that the scoring was so close.
Yes, Commissioner.
It was so close, and I kind of want to see what the vetting process looked like. With this particular one, I don't have any questions in regards to your presentation or how you got to this point, so I will definitely be supporting this. But it's just my request, and thank you for wanting to acknowledge the 101, and thank you for acknowledging the request and providing that backup material on this. So I just wanted to go on the record for that clarification.
Thank you,
I do
Commissioner.
appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Commissioner Oliver?
I must be technologically snake bit. Because I didn't have either of these attachments when I reviewed the material before the meeting or when I sat down here, so I'm just looking at this for the first time. So I'm discombobulated because I can't formulate the questions correctly. I'm familiar with this approach.
Sure.
But when you pick the 3 firms, and then you have a series of 5 bullets with 15 sub-bullets in each one, do each of the 3 firms have areas of expertise within those bullet areas? Or might you look at 2 of the firms for a consultant in one of the bullet areas? How does that mix and match?
No, absolutely. No, that's a great question. So just with the way the proposals worked out, all 5 firms that submitted had experience with all of these subject areas. So it just ended up being the top 3 just seemed to have the most relevant and most descriptive expertise related to the 3 buckets.
So then you have a particular project in an area. How do you determine which of the firms? Do you go to both of the firms if there's 2 that have expertise in that area? Or how do you make a determination within that mix?
Yeah, no, I think it would just depend on, which, because there's lots of different folks who would work with the GSEs, but I think it's, you might go with a firm that maybe like has relevance or knows something about a particular area. So say, for example, we're doing work in, South St. Pete, for example. We might go to a firm that has expertise in that area. So I think it would just, depend on the subject matter, but I think to your point, it would, I guess, be a staff determination of who we think would be best in a particular area.
And then sometimes I know it's in the past, we have talked to like multiple firms.
Okay.
And then, one firm may not have their expert in that one thing available. They're working on another project, so then that can lead to how we pick them.
Exactly.
Fair enough. Thank you.
All right, so a couple questions. What was our prior general services contract amount?
For each of the 3 contracts that we had,
Well, so we're being asked to approve a $2 million each.
it was the same in 2018. It was $2 million to 3 different vendors.
Okay, and how much of that did we wind up using?
I kind of knew you were going to ask that question, so I have the numbers. And they were a little
I will find other
misleading.
questions that I think. The challenge is on, I appreciate it.
I tried. So out of those, we did not have a single vendor that spent more than 35% of the contract.
Okay. And Jacob, you mentioned that each of these companies have expertise in all of the areas.
Yes.
And that really it's just up to internally looking at which one of those vendors would be the right choice for whatever particular project
Exactly.
may come up. Okay, I just want to make sure I understood that. One of the questions that did come to mind is AECOM on their Section 4, their DEI and sustainability score was less, significantly less than all of the other firms. What is missing there, or what do the other ones have that is unique that caused that difference?
Al, did you want to take that one?
So, in your packet, we've been doing, I think, a good job, we're getting better every time of adding a DEI statement inside the action item. But I want to make sure that it's factual, because you, Commissioner, you said, hey, Al, what does this mean? And I give you that look like, I don't know. But if you look at the DEI portion for inside your packet, you notice that AECom only has one DBE supplier in theirs versus WSP having 5 and HNTB having 7. So that's one of the reasons why they scored lower, just because of their DBE participation inside the solicitation process. One of the factors.
Let's see if I could add to that, Al. So as somebody that was on the selection committee, I think it was just a matter of the level of detail. So it wasn't necessarily that I thought, oh, they were terrible from a diversity perspective, but we would have just, I think as a committee, would have liked to have just seen more information from them in that particular part of their proposal.
Okay, yeah, because technically speaking, one DBE that does 90% of the work is better than 13 DBEs that do 5% of the work, right? So scale of that is important as well. The number was significantly different than the other companies, so I wanted a little bit more of an explanation on that, so I appreciate that. And finally, and this is more of an operational question, I don't remember. Would this item be better off in the finance committee? I'm on finance and planning, so I can never remember where I hear things. But is there a reason why it's in planning versus finance?
Well,
Not that we don't like seeing you, Al, in both meetings, but.
yes, sir. I don't have a good answer for you. I think it was a toss-up between which one, and because this is for future projects and things in the future, that the methodology was that we bring it to the planning committee.
Okay, I just want to make sure, because we're also talking about committee structures and other things, and so, being that this is really a financial contract, I wanted to make sure I understood that. And I guess actually I do have one more final question. So fiscal impact, we have operating funds, so it's going to come from operating funds, but we don't actually have that.
Well,
What?
Actually, it's going to be, I would probably say like 99% of this will come from Federal Transit Administration funds for the capital budget.
Okay. But we still don't know what those are because we haven't actually pulled down a particular project that is
Right.
going to those. So those will come through.
Right, and we set aside money every year in the capital budget for such things.
Okay. All right, thank you. I would make that adjustment in the summary.
This morning.
All right, if there, Commissioner Albritton, you look content.
Question?
All right, is there a motion?
Contingent upon successful negotiations, recommend approval of a 3-year contract with 2 one-year options for general services, consultant services with AECom Technical Services, HNTB Corporation, and WSP USA Inc. for a total contract amount not to exceed $2 million each, and to authorize the CEO to exercise the 2 one-year options.
That is the motion.
And that's my motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Albritton seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, motion passed unanimously. Thank you all. Thank you for the challenge.
Good
We'll
job,
come up
David.
with harder questions next time. Moving on to 4A, Debbie Leas, our CFO, Al Burns, Director of Budget, Nick Sagan, Budget Manager, and Heather Sobush, Chief Sustainability and Planning Officers, the whole gang's here. Will now take us through PSTA's fiscal year 2024 proposed budget. Debbie, the floor is yours.
Thank you. All right, well, just want to say welcome to everybody for one of the most exciting things, and I just lost my notes, but that's okay. All right. We are going to be going over the budget this morning, and you, as the planning committee, now you got me all excited about finance. We'll be seeing the fiscal '24 budget. You're the first people to see it, and we've got it in your packet. And over the summer, I would hope that you would go through it in detail, because there's quite a bit of detail there. And staff is always available to sit down and go through that with you. As you recall, we had our great workshop towards the beginning of the month, and at that workshop, we had each department head go through all of their activities in detail. Today, we're not going to put as many people out to you. It is just the four of us going through this. I am going to be kicking it off. Then I'm going to turn it over to Al to go over the types of reductions that we're going to be seeing. My coworker, Heather Sobush, to go through the service reductions. And I'll pass it to Nick for difficult discussions on rollback scenarios, and then I will bring it home. So let's take a look at the agenda for today. I would have to say this is one of the tightest budgets we've had, and it's also probably one of the more challenging ones I've had in a number of years. And there's two main reasons for this, and that is the COVID relief funding is winding down, and the other is inflation. So between those two, we've had a number of challenges. But as Brad showed us at the workshop, there are solutions. And the solution is to keep expenses down to counteract inflation so that we try to allow the local revenues to grow, and we'll be seeing this in charts, allow the local revenues to grow while the expenses remain flat. And that will bring us back to a more normalized level of things in fiscal '25. And you'll be seeing that we'll be accomplishing this through a variety of reductions across all of our lines of business, including service reductions. And as I mentioned, Nick will be going through a separate rollback scenario of what it would look like with service reductions if we went to the full rollback rate. So let's take a moment to talk about the inflation side. On a regional level, our inflation is at about 8.9%. I've put a few examples up here of items that exceed that. The first on the list is Jolly Trolley, our privatized service provider, and their costs have gone up around 18%. We also see that operator salaries have gone up around 13% to maintain a competitive market rate that we have, and our fare collection software for Flamingo, up to about $600,000 annually compared to our very old system, which was at around $70,000 annually. In addition, we've listed some areas where things have gone up since the pandemic. We had a robust discussion, which I'm sorry you missed, on trash at the meeting. It took up, I don't know, about 4 hours of the meeting on trash, as I always say. We talk trash. We've seen diesel fuel increases, as I'm sure everybody has, as well as in paratransit MOD costs have gone up significantly from our previous provider that had so many financial challenges that they basically went out of business. But we are developing ways to address the increase in the mobility costs for the future. Now, one area I don't have any control over is the insurance market, and it's what they call a hard market, and we're seeing costs go up almost 19%. The other is the use of the COVID funds going away. You can see we've already used the majority of the funds, and we're kind of spreading out the balance of it over the next couple years. And we're very grateful for the funds, but with those funds going away and the effect of inflation, we are having challenges, just like everybody across the country. Matter of fact, I'm sure you've seen a lot of headlines in the news and across any publications, or if you're a transit geek like I am, you probably have different mass transit emails coming to you daily. But one thing I can say is because for a number of years we've been very fiscally responsible, anything that we're recommending in this budget today doesn't hold the severity of what you'll be seeing across the Bay at Hart. So we are trying to be as extremely sustainable as possible with the least impacts to our customers. So in this chart, I may need Jacob for this, I'm not sure. Brad told me I have to jump. But the orange line is our expenses. When we started out looking at this budget year, we took a look at our assumptions that we presented to the board and came up with $120 million worth of expenses on the orange line. And that is, let me see if I can do the pointer thing. Yeah, right up here. And that, it was above our revenues for $114 million that we had anticipated for this year. As you can tell in fiscal '23, We're about 113 million for expenses, slightly budgeted within, with the revenues, which you see in blue. Now, the revenues, as you see, are remaining pretty flat. So I call it, they're flatlining on us, while the expenses are increasing at a greater rate. So we need to do something about this, and what we're looking to do is to basically keep expenses as flat as possible. And the first thing we did is we looked at all the lines of expenses across all the divisions that do not impact customers and cut back as much as we possibly could. And even with that, I should say, I'm very happy to say, we were able to maintain our expenses in those non-salary areas flat to last year. And we're compensating for the inflation. We do have in the budget increases to our employees because a lot of it is contractual. And we do want to be able to handle that within the budget. We're seeing a small reduction in service to help us out. And any of the reduction here from the 400 operators we have today to the 379 will be handled through attrition, so we do not need to lay anybody off. So by doing so, you can now see that the lines have come together, that our revenues and our expenses are now equal to each other going out. So that's exactly what we wanted to do, was show sustainability in our budget. And we're very pleased to be able to show a balanced budget with these slight reductions. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Al.
Thank you, Debbie. Al Burns, your budget director. And what I would like to do at this time is to go over how we plan on addressing this in next year. At the workshop, we went through department by department at a very high level. And what we were trying to do is we'll have a more robust conversation on service reductions. And what I'm here to do is to show you kind of at mid-level where we address some of these reductions and got it to a flat budget that Debbie spoke about for the next upcoming years. In 2019, in 19, 20, and 21, you'll see that things relatively were flat in those at that time period. That was primarily, I would say, majority because of COVID. We didn't have as much ridership, we didn't have as many vehicles out on the street, so things were able to stay relatively flat during that time. But in 2022, you saw a huge spike, you see a big spike, and that's because we had more riders, the fleet was more active, staff came back to work, etc. And that's represented in this 2022. And then right now in 2023, we're projected to be at, by the end of this year, close to around, maybe a little bit over, $109 million by the end of this fiscal year. So $113 million budget, how does that compare to other agencies that are similar to our size? And I would tell you, as my CFO is, we're small, but we're mighty, and we do good things, and we're very efficient. As you can see on the slide, Miami-Dade, 773, Lynx or Orlando, 199, Jacksonville, West Palm, and then at the very bottom, you see PSTA. Now, I left off Hart, and I love our peers across the bay. I came from there. I worked there for 9 years. But they're actually looking at cutting theirs down to $110 million. So $4 million.
104.
Oh, excuse me, $104 million. I'm sorry, $104 million. And that they just had their budget workshop, and they presented that to their budget not too long ago. But $104 million. So they're reducing their budget by a tremendous amount, and we're not looking at reducing it as much here. And with that amount of reductions, they're primarily going to do that with reductions in service. Just as a friendly reminder on this chart, and you'll see this throughout this summer, all the way up until October. Right now, and I would tell you the numbers that I particularly am focused on is these bottom line. You see up here where everything's kind of coming together, but I'm more focused on the bottom line here of FY 22, 2.4, 23, 2.1, 24, 1.7, 25, 1.3. So we're trying to keep things as flat as possible for the outlying years.
And those are our reserves that we have that are non-designated.
Thanks, Debbie. So we started off, and we've done a bang-up job, and we've reduced by $7 million from where we started at. I'm looking over at Nick like, it seems like last year. It's been such a task. But I just want to, I'm looking at Heather, and I'm looking at Trish, and I'm looking at IT, and man, Henry, and just all marketing. And God bless marketing. They really knocked it out of the park, I would say, and Abhishek. But everybody played a huge part in reducing the numbers. And I just want to say thank you. And I want to say thank you to Kevin Lai, Kevin, and Nick Sagan for shepherding us through this process. But you'll see that almost everything on this matrix here is reduced, except insurance. And I get a little jealous because Diane comes up to Finance Committee and no questions, and but that's okay. But as Debbie said, that's a hard market, and we have no control over that. And that is absolutely true. Insurance. Excuse me. I think it's on here, and I may be mistaken. Excuse me. Fringe benefits. HR. And we in the Finance Committee earlier this morning, we had 0 increase in our healthcare costs. Can you guys say that? I know where my spouse works, she can't say that, and that's just a tremendous amount of savings. And that was a $10 million agreement that was approved for us to move forward with Cigna. So hats off to them. But down here, we talked about privatization, and you talk about the paratransit, and you talk about the trolleys and MOD. I just kind of want to go to the next slide. Everything over here, we were able to lower our expenses on fuel. I tell you, Kevin Lee, David Hensler, myself, with Debbie's leadership, we monitored the fuel, and we were able to lock in over 67% of our fuel, and I'll illustrate that on another slide. But over here on the left, you'll see privatized transportation, the trolley service, contracted privatized services. You'll see the TD uptick in that, almost $600,000. Privatization, and then we talked about the hard market with our insurance. These are things that we are able to control. They're contractual obligations that we have as well. So we weren't able to mitigate those expenses. Reductions. I can't applaud the team enough. We've locked in fuel. Initially, we locked in a certain amount. I can't, the percentages are escaping me right now. But we locked in a certain amount. And then we looked at the market, and Kevin Lee, one of the financial planning and analysis, along with Debbie's leadership, said, keep your eye on this, and let's look at it, monitor it daily. And then we locked in, and now we've locked in 2/3 of our fuel. Two-thirds, and I think that saved us approximately around $900,000. I'm just looking at FP&A for
2.8 million savings.
how much?
2.8 million.
2.8 million. I'm sorry, man.
Gotta shout that one out.
The healthcare, we talked about that, keeping us flat. PST access demand management. What we plan on doing is Bonnie Epstein, our mobility director, she's taken different initiatives, and I think Heather's going to talk about those in hers, where we're trying to mitigate the amount of trips that the paratransit patrons can take, because that is an increasing cost for us on an annual basis, and it's contracted out. the 21 fewer positions. I feel like I'm blessed to be at an agency that isn't laying people off. I truly am. And I'm proud to be at an agency that isn't laying people off. These 21 fewer positions that are being reduced, as Debbie said, just for reinforcement, that's going to come about through people are retiring, you know, organically happening, or I think the proper term of that is through attrition. And this was the painful part, and I'm looking at our CEO for this. Non-personal personnel costs reduced. This was one that we looked at and we had everyone justify. Hey, you can't send as many people to conferences this year. Watch your P-card expenses. What are you doing with this? And everyone really, use the procurement term, sharpened their pencil to get their budget line items down. This is a different illustration on the reductions. You can see that all of the areas primarily had reductions, all of them except two. And one is executive division, that's Brad, you know, so you guys could ask him all the hard questions on why he went up. But all jokes aside, we transferred things. We used to have different legal services and strategic communications, things of this nature. We used to keep in the general function account. And Debbie, with her leadership, she said, hey, and Brad, of course, hey, let's move these and let's shift these from these general function accounts to the people that are actually using them, which is the executive division. Also, another uptick you'll see is the insurance. So we already talked about that and elaborated on that, of it being a hard market. And then you also see facilities maintenance division, all the consumable. In the finance committee, we bring a lot of contracts to you, and you see that the prices have escalated across the board with a lot of these things. So I'm going to hand it off to my buddy, my BFF, through this process, Ms. Heather Sobush, to talk about reductions in service.
Thank you, Al.
You're welcome.
So we are looking at some level of service reductions. We're evaluating a number of scenarios. First, we show in here that, and this is based on board discussion last month, a rollback rate scenario. This would be a major cut of about $7 million and a reduction of about 100 employees. This will be further outlined in July as my staff are working on some options that we could present for that. And then for now, we are recommending smaller cuts just to keep our budget within, our services within budget. First, we're recommending that we would end all services at 10 p.m. instead of midnight, except for the Sunrunner. This does affect a number of routes, but we do have our TD late shift program that people can potentially use if they're workers. And then next, we're suggesting that the Central Avenue trolley be truncated at Grand Central so that it would operate between the pier and Grand Central. Approximately 70% of the ridership in that route is in that section. And then we feel that people that need to travel more west have options. There's the Route 18, the Route 52, and then of course the Sunrunner. And then we're recommending that Route 59, which serves Ulmerton Road primarily, go to 2017 service levels. So from a 15-minute to 20-minute frequency. We increased frequency in 2017, but didn't see much ridership growth from that. And then, of course, as I mentioned before, TD Late Shift and Sunrunner provide alternatives in addition to other routes. And then our mobility on demand changes are expected to result in some savings as well. So in order to show that our recommended service reductions are relatively minor, we're showing what we have currently in the FY23 budget projected to the year end. And then we will show you how these are impacted with the service reductions. And you'll see here we offer, of course, a variety of services you know of. We have our fixed route, which is the majority of ridership, and then we have our privatized trolley services, mobility on demand, and access. And then you'll see here some of the impacts. We do expect some ridership loss from the service cuts, and also some, if we charge fares, when we start charging fares on the Sunrunner, some ridership loss from that. And then you'll see some of the other impacts here. And then with our expected ridership, we'd be 18th of our 40 years of service in terms of ridership. And now I will hand it to Nick. He's probably jet lagged.
Yeah, a little bit.
I didn't use the laser. I don't know how it works.
There it is.
Okay.
Morning, everyone. So I get to talk all about the rollback rate. So what you'll see up here is that orange line. That's the same as we showed in the solution slide. This blue line is what would happen if we use the rollback rate. And we immediately would have deficits in fiscal year 2024 that would be cumulative until future fiscal years. So we would immediately have to make action on that. These are our ad valorem taxes versus our expenses. The orange is the ad valorem taxes that we anticipate receiving this fiscal year. The blue is what will go up with a 12% increase to that taxable value. Now, that number is only $8.2 million. That sounds significant, and it's a lot of money. But this orange, this is our $113 million adopted fiscal year 2023 number. Now, if you apply what is happening to Tampa Bay, from the Bureau of Labor and Statistics, they'd say the CPI was 8.9% in January. If you applied that to our budget that we adopted for this fiscal year, that's $10 million. So that 12% is actually less than the 8.9%. Basically, the growth of our expenses is just, it's escalating more than the growth of that 12%. So the effect of the rollback rate will be a $7.6 million reduction in revenue, which would require more service changes in order for the budget to be balanced again. In addition, it would be a bigger cut, as Heather has already identified. In addition to the 21 positions that are already being phased out in fiscal year 2024's budget, it potentially would also be another 80 full-time employees on top of that, which requires more public hearings and more service adjustments. That's all I got. I'll hand it off to Debbie.
Thank you, Nick. So we have talked about quite a bit this morning, a lot to digest, but to just kind of summarize it, we were able to present a balanced budget with the ending of the one-time COVID relief funds, and despite the inflation, we've done actions to counteract that. As Al said, and as I said, we'll be able to reduce the number of staff through attrition only. I've lived through many reductions in my lifetime, where I, as CFO, had to sit down with each employee through a layoff and explain why. It is not pleasant, let me tell you that. We've done some very smart service reduction, as Heather mentioned, where we're giving alternatives to the riders who will be affected. And what is also important is we're maintaining our reserves at the required levels or the recommended levels by the Government Finance Officers Association. Their recommendation is you keep a minimum of 2 months of reserves set aside. And we'll be talking about that during the summer, as well as we bring forth a recommendation for our reserve policies. I've been getting a lot of information from other places across the state of Florida on their reserve policies, and we are probably the most, I don't know if the word's conservative, but we're at the least end of keeping money. So something to think about. Now, up on the chart here, we have all the different meetings and things coming up, but what's most important is next month, we'll be talking about the property tax and the trim notice. So we will be putting forth some additional scenarios and talking about, do we keep with the recommendation that's in the budget with minimum reductions, or do we talk about going on a full rollback rate with some other implications. So you, as the planning committee, will be looking to you to make the recommendations to the board next month. How much reductions do you want to take to public hearing? So those are things to think about, and again, please feel free to reach out, not just next month, but during the summer, to Brad to set up some meetings with us if you want to go into any deep dives on this, because it's very important. So that concludes our presentation, so I'll open it up for questions.
Commissioner Oliver?
Yeah, I really feel badly that I missed the budget meeting, and now that I know you were talking trash about me, I really feel bad, and I want to register my concern again about the change in the planning committee meeting, because the change to the 21st of July conflicts with my City of Seminole budget meeting.
no.
So are we not meeting on July 21st instead of July 19th, or is that now changed back?
We are, we're
Yeah, and
meeting
so-
on Friday,
so
the 21st.
My consternation continues. So,
It's okay.
since I missed the budget meeting, a couple of really quick questions, because this is like drinking from a fire hose. The increase in revenue, the increase in the executive division, I understand shifting around, but the general function also seems to be up. So what, if you could go back to that slide, where is the overall increase? Because I understand a shift between categories, and we kidded about the CEO's budget area, but if you look at the CEO and the general function, they're both up.
Yes.
So where is the increase there?
Well, just to defend the executive division here,
Well, I spotted it beforehand. I mean,
pretty much
whenever the executive
100%
division comes up, you're
of,
gonna- it's like a red flag.
100% of the executive division increase came from moving contracts, consultants, and our lawyer from general function to the executive division for the first time.
So why
The general
function
function
not go
still has utilities.
Okay.
It's pretty much the thing that's left in there, and those are, as Al showed on the other
Okay,
slide.
that answers the question. And then the second point I'd make, because I know we're over already, I'm not gonna belabor the issue, and I'll have private conversations with you, Debbie.
Okay.
About several issues, but the question about, I see all the reductions, this is good work. What about raising revenues from other sources? I see that the PSTA access mobility on demand fare increases. Are there other areas for increases? The trolley's a good example, and I know you've got some contractual things that will keep you from doing some of that, but are there other areas of additional revenues that you've explored?
So the additional revenues will be starting to charge fares on the Sunrunner,
Okay.
effective in October, and then we will be, as we look at mobility on demand, which we've seen a large increase in ridership.
Right.
We're taking a look and saying if we kind of say your first two rides are at the $3.50, but after that, you're going up to $6.
Okay.
Because there are some people, I know Brad doesn't believe me, but there are some people who go to the mall
Yeah.
and literally take their mobility on demand from this point on the mall to that point on the mall to this point on the mall. And we've seen that where there are people, I think we had 18 people on one day do that.
So are there, so what about the trolley?
Yeah.
The Central
Yeah.
Ave,
And any of the trolley services, beach trolley, have there been have we looked at every possible, you balance a budget by reduction or increase in revenue?
Right.
And the question is, and you answered one sub-question, which is, this budget includes increasing, putting a fare on the Sunrunner.
right.
So, and that answers one of my major questions. But are there other areas where there could be possible fare increases that we haven't explored, or you have explored and declined?
I would say right now, our fare in the state of Florida is the highest published fare.
Okay.
We are looking, we are grateful to some of the county commissioners on the PSA board who have connected us. You know, we are also
Sure.
sort of bracing for the impacts of offering veterans free ride, which the board
Right.
voted unanimously for, and that will be a revenue decrease.
Yes.
But they have identified some small funding increases to offset that piece. We're trying to mitigate for that as well.
Good. And one last question, and you may have said it, and I just only heard one part of it. The recommended reserve is 2 months. What does this budget provide in terms of reserves?
Well, we are maintaining it at the 2 monts
At 2 months.
reserves.
Okay, thank you.
And what happens is every time you increase expenses, you have to
Yeah, no,
increase the
no,
reserve. So
no
now we're
question.
keeping it flat,
Question.
keeping it good.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Are there other questions?
Chair Schulman.
so I also missed the budget workshop and the opportunity to talk
We missed
trash
you
about
too.
Commissioner Oliver, so, we'll find some other time to do that, but no, I prefer to, review the actual budget and work on those. I did have one question, though, about the Jolly Trolley expenses being up 18% for the year.
That's
How does that
contractual.
happen?
That is contractual. And that is something that we're going to be looking at, because I think there has been what I would term in a procurement type way, some cardinal changes as to how they're operating their business. And we were anticipating paying for a new location for them, you know, and the costs related to that. And they are not going into that new location. So I've reached out to the chair of their board and said we will be taking a look at this, because it's not fair for us to be paying for something.
To be
we don't-
fair, the 18% increase was not a ongoing thing. We, in 2023, it is 18% higher than it was in 2022 because we entered into a new, you might recall, contract with them in 23, and just like our own expenses, their expenses went way up for employees and everything. And as Debbie said, some things that have not come to fruition in 2023 like we thought. We were paying an amortized rate for their new facility that they were working out with the city of Clearwater, and that didn't happen. And I know Commissioner Alberton knows about this too, that they're trying to find another place for their facility. Like Debbie says, we're gonna sit down and have a deeper discussion. The other idea is if we have extra trolleys, because we have reduced the Central Avenue trolley, then can we, the goal would be to somehow have them use some of our trolleys, or perhaps even that we just do the maintenance on the trolleys for them, and they just provide the operation, as a way to save money on the trolley moving forward. So, stay tuned, for more discussions on the Jolly Trolley.
So the Jolly Trolley increase from a year ago was an expected 18%.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was really the ratcheting up to the new contract level, which was a big increase. But then I think it's now baked in at like 5 or 6% per year.
Okay. The way it's listed in the slide under inflation 8.9 and Jolly Trolley, it seems like that was an unexpected 18% increase, and therefore it leads to the thought that things are getting away. Like it's running rampant.
So maybe we should say contractual.
Right, or not even included, because it's not due to, it's on a slide titled inflation.
It's not due to
Well, it's due to
inflation.
inflation. It's definitely, that's why it went up.
But it was contractual, is what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay, so, okay. Yeah, I'm gonna need some more time with the actual budget, to review before I start peppering with more questions. So are there other questions? No? All right.
This is a start, yeah.
Thank you all. Are there other business items? Okay, I did have actually one. I just wanted to make sure, since Heather's here, I just wanted to again make a plug for the Pinellas County Schools and the PTSA and PTA. There's a lot of acronyms that are all the same. So PSTA at PTSA seems like a good PSA for our service. At the end of, in August and then beginning of September 9th, we were invited to attend their PTA workshop where they invite all the PTAs in. And so I just wanted to make sure that we're staying in touch with the PTA, as well as also Pinellas County School Board is currently revamping their routes. And hopefully we'll-
Perhaps. Can you share those dates with us, or Whitney, do you have those dates?
So I believe it's September 9th is the PTA workshop that they have.
Okay.
And they're expecting 300 members of PTAs around the county to attend. And they told me that we could have a booth and be set up there, and potentially even also have a segment to speak about PSTA and student ridership and engaging on that end. I just want to make sure. They're kind of, they're a little touch and go over the summer because all the families and whatnot are disappearing, but I want to make sure. I'm going to bring it up every meeting until it's on
Yeah.
the calendar somewhere.
I know that marketing communications met with their marketing communications, and I'm still meeting with the transportation person regularly. So
Okay.
we'll reach out to the PTA group.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other items? No? All right, seeing none, we are at 12:05. I apologize for only going 5 minutes over and not making it longer. Thanks so much. We will see you at our next meeting, Friday, July 21st at 10:30. Except for Commissioner Oliver.
Instead of.
You know, I put my meetings on the calendar.
Thank you, Commissioner Albritton.
In advance, and I never.
Be awesome.
Planning committee was,
I have
on the 19th, Friday.
I realized it'd be as there wasn't any.
But you know, we're on council break, right? And I'm still here. How about that?
I'm very happy to see you here.
Here's a persistent